The ambiguity of our modern theological vocabulary. A robust defense of the Incarnation requires a precise definition of God's identity before attempting to demonstrate that Jesus of Nazareth shares that divine nature. Well-meaning believers frequently declare that Jesus is God, assuming that their audience shares a traditional Orthodox understanding of the cosmos. However, resting modern apologetics on this simple phrase is intellectually insufficient. Unorthodox groups such as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Jehovah's Witnesses will enthusiastically agree with the statement that Jesus is God while entirely denying historic Orthodox theology. These groups utilize Orthodox theological vocabulary but employ a fundamentally different theological dictionary. Latter-day Saint theology, for instance, operates within a polytheistic framework, teaching that God the Father was once a mortal man who progressed to godhood. In this cosmology, Jesus is the literal firstborn spirit child of heavenly parents who eventually attained his own divine status. Conversely, Jehovah's Witnesses define Jesus as the first and greatest created being, specifically identifying the pre-incarnate Christ as Michael the Archangel. Simply stating that Jesus is God fails to protect Orthodox Christology from these modern theological frameworks. As Robert Bowman Jr. and J. Ed Komoszewski assert, one cannot articulate a robust high Christology without first exposing the flawed logic of these alternative systems. To protect the eschatological hope of the Christian faith, they provide a highly specific definition to govern biblical interpretation. The incarnate Christ is the unique, eternal Son, truly God in nature and status, who humbled himself to become a mortal man to secure human redemption. The Creator and the created, setting monotheistic boundaries. The core logic of the biblical narrative proceeds on the assumption of an infinite ontological gap between the Creator and the created order. God is the one uncreated, eternal being. Throughout the Hebrew Bible, the prophets consistently war against syncretism to defend the exclusive prerogatives of Yahweh, insisting that God refuses to share his eternal glory with mere creatures. Reading these ancient texts through a proper Second Temple Jewish lens reveals that Yahweh actively populated the spiritual realm with a divine council of lesser beings, angels, and heavenly hosts. Ancient Jews understood that Yahweh delegated order and authority to these agents. This is evident in the mysterious figure known as the Angel of the Lord, a unique messenger who frequently appears in historical narratives to enforce covenant loyalty and act as an authorized representative bearing the very name of God. Yet the unified biblical narrative maintains a crucial boundary. While Yahweh delegates authority, he never shares his actual ontological nature with created beings. Thus, when the earliest Jewish believers began assigning the exclusive, uncreated identity of Yahweh directly to Jesus, they were making a staggering theological claim. They recognized the Messiah as sharing the divine identity long before any supposed evolutionary timeline allows, placing Jesus firmly on the creator side of the boundary. Hezekiah's blueprint for deity. To build a text-rooted defense of the incarnate Son, one must establish what makes God unique. Rather than relying solely on abstract philosophical categories, Bowman and Komoszewski outlined 5 specific criteria that define biblical monotheism, utilizing King Hezekiah's prayer in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 15, to ground their framework in the Old Testament text. In his desperation against the Assyrian army, Hezekiah prays to the God of Israel, defining God by assigning him 5 exclusive prerogatives. These criteria form the HANDS acronym, which organizes the defense of Christ's deity. Honors. God alone is the proper object of religious honors. Hezekiah demonstrates this by falling down to pray exclusively to him. Attributes. God is the one uncreated, eternal being. Names. God was uniquely revealed to Israel as Yahweh. Hezekiah explicitly calls upon this covenantal name. Deeds. God is the exclusive creator of the world, recognized by Hezekiah as the maker of heaven and earth. Seat. God is the sovereign king who rules over all things, sitting enthroned above the cherubim. If New Testament writers apply these exact 5 prerogatives to Jesus, they are deliberately placing him within the unique identity of Yahweh. The apostolic record does precisely this. The Gospels record individuals offering Jesus the exact honors due only to God. The epistles describe his eternal attributes. The text applies the sacred names of God to him, for example in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 28, and in Titus, chapter 2, verse 13. The narratives depict his divine deeds such as forgiving sins and sustaining the universe, and the epistles place him on the ultimate seat of authority at the right hand of the Majesty on high. The relational distinction, dismantling the modalist error. While proving that Jesus is God is necessary, historic orthodoxy must also fiercely defend the distinct persons of the Godhead. Flattening the rich relational complexity of the Trinity leads to profound exegetical errors. Bowman and Komoszewski systematically dismantled the theology of oneness Pentecostalism, also known as modalism, which attempts to collapse the Godhead by claiming Jesus is simply the Father in human form. Collapsing the Godhead creates bizarre textual dilemmas. If Jesus is simply the Father incarnate, the relational dynamics in the Gospel of John, such as the Father sending the Son or the mutual love between the Spirit and the Son, are rendered logically incoherent. This tension reaches its breaking point in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus begs the Father to let the cup of wrath pass from him. If Jesus is the Father, this prayer turns a moment of profound grief into an empty theatrical performance. A high Christology recognizes a real, eternal relational distinction. The Father sending the Son establishes an appropriate disposition rather than a hierarchy of rank. This relational love between the distinct persons of the Father and the Son serves as the very foundation of the gospel message. The scandal of the incarnate paradox. A true incarnation requires more than a divine spirit wearing a human costume. To rescue humanity, the Son took on authentic human flesh. As the author of the book of Hebrews notes, Jesus had to be made like his brothers in every respect, experiencing true mortality, exhaustion, and temptation, yet remaining without sin. By entering the created order, the eternal Son willingly placed himself in a position of intense physical dependence on the Father, explaining his cry of dereliction from the cross as a genuine experience of human mortality. Affirming that Jesus is both God and man creates an intellectual paradox. When the infinite Creator steps into finite history, human logic inevitably struggles under the weight of that reality. Critics argue that a person cannot be finite and infinite simultaneously, viewing this paradox as a fatal contradiction. However, in the context of divine revelation, the hypostatic union posits that Christ possesses an infinite nature regarding his deity and a finite nature regarding his humanity. The Gospels present an astonishing pattern of paradoxes. The omnipresent one walked dusty roads, the omnipotent one slept in a boat, the eternal one was born of a woman. This is the raw historical reality of witnesses describing the Creator interacting intimately with his creation, the resurrection as historical vindication. Jesus' earthly life culminated in an event that permanently altered the trajectory of the human race. The bodily resurrection serves as the ultimate historical vindication of Christ's unique identity. Had Jesus remained dead, his claims of divine authority would have been buried with him. Yet the New Testament relentlessly insists that God raised him from the dead, vindicating his teachings and revealing him as the Son of God sent to conquer sin. Viewed through a Second Temple Jewish lens, the earliest followers understood the eschatological weight of this event. Their hope was anchored in the reality that Yahweh had come in the flesh, died, and conquered the grave. The resurrection stands as the guarantee of the believer's future resurrection. Conclusion. Modern apologetics must actively anchor its defense in specific biblical definitions of deity. Because contemporary religious movements often utilize orthodox vocabulary to mask unorthodox theology, believers must evaluate theological frameworks using the rigorous criteria of Old Testament monotheism, such as the Hands framework, derived from 2 Kings chapter 19. By recognizing the exclusive honors, attributes, names, deeds, and seat of Yahweh, and observing how the apostles applied these strictly to Jesus, the Church is equipped to dismantle modalist and polytheistic errors, preserving the historical reality of the incarnate Son who secures humanity's eschatological hope.